Okay, let's do some speed pads next. So let's go into our player controller. Let's look. So we currently have a variable for move speed, but we need to expand this a little bit so that we can play with the move speed. So let's not preset our move speed. Let's instead have a public float base. What happened there? Look down and type and didn't see what it was doing. Float base speed. Let's set that equal to 5f because that's what our move speed was, and then we're going to have a public float environment. Let's go, just call it enviro speed multi, and then let's have another public float called buff speed multi, and then in update we're going to calculate our move speed. So we're going to go move speed is equal to base speed times enviro is multiplied by, now you can do this two ways. You could make this additive. It's because I spelled enviro. I went with enviro speed multiplier plus buff speed. There's a lot of typos in there. Let's fix our typos up. Okay, multi, not melty, and enviro. Let's just type out the whole word. Alright, let's fix these now. Alright. Okay, so we have our base speed, which is what our old speed was, and then we're going to multiply it by these. Also, we're going to set these to 1 by default. So if we haven't played with them, shit, that makes our base speed to double just off the basis. Yeah, that works, I guess. So you could think about a few different ways to do this. You could multiply these two variables by each other. That would mean you could leave these as one, but I want to make them additive, I think. So we're going to adjust these by timesing them and stuff. So by default this should equal 1, and then if for some reason you made these bigger, you could. Yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it like this for now. Alright, so this is just timesing our base speed by 1 to get our move speed, but we're gonna change these with our speed pad. So next, let's start making our speed pad. So let's go back over to our project, create a new C# script, and we're going to call this one speed pad. Lowercase p. Alright, let's open up speed pad. Alright, so let's start with some headers to make. nice and easy. So we're going to go header, we go default use, we're going to call this one use, capital letters, and learn to spell. Okay, default use. And we're going to put in a serializable. We're going to call this, we're going to have a float. We're going to call this speed multi. And then we're going to have, it's not, we're going to have a bool. I'm going to go is speed boost. I'm going to set that equal to true by default. So it is a speed boost unless we tell it otherwise. Okay. So this is just simply so we can have a platform that is always a speed boost, always a speed slow. Also, spelling is not great today. Lots of typos. Okay, let's go another header. We call this toggle states. Okay, we're going to have a serialized bool called toggle. I'm going to set that to false by default. And then we're going to have float for duration. And we're not going to set that to have a default, because if we turn it to on, we will be wanting to set that. We're going to have a float for time. So that one we don't need to do on, and then we're going to have a private static list of speed pads. I'm going to call this active pads is equal to new list of speed pads. Okay, and then we're going to have a bool. I'm going to call it player on pad. And we're going to set equal to false as well. And then finally, we're going to have a reference to the player controller. We'll call that player controller. Okay, so that's all the variables we need. So let's go if player controller equals null. Player controller equals find object of type player controller. There should only be one. We can make this serialized field, so you can put the player in manually on every pad if you want to for optimization, but otherwise it will. Okay, now let's do our update. So we go if it is toggle, we're going to have time plus equals time dot delta time. So where's my bottom bracket? No, we already have one. Okay. And then if time is greater than duration, speed boost equals whatever the opposite of it is. I'm going to set time to 0, and then, okay, if play on pad, and then we'll finish writing this little bit in a second, because we don't have the method that we want to call here yet. Alright, what have we messed up here? Where are we missing a bracket? Here. Okay. So this is just our toggle functionality. It's going to work the same. We haven't set up a delay, but you could add the delay in like you did with the other one if you wanted to. Alright. Let's go on and let's do our updating of our speed first. Let's look at how we handled that. So we're going to go void update player speed. Okay. And then we're going to call update player speed here. It's the last little bit for that. Okay. So we're going to go for each SpeedPad pad in active pads. If pad dot is speed boost we're going to set the player we're going to set the player controller dot enviro move speed multi equal to 1 times pad dot speed multi, and then for else we're going to do the same, but instead we're going to divide it. Okay, so this will update the player's speed. Okay, I made a mistake. We need a few more variables here. We need a float base multi, let's call it. Let's set it to equal to 1, and then we need a float called resultant result multi, which is equal to whatever it likes being. Okay. So let's set on the start of this result multi equal to base multi, base multi should never be adjusted. So we do that, and then here instead, let's set result this is so that we don't keep changing the multiplier and we're resetting our multiplier to 1 each time we change it, and then finally, after we've done this for each, we should do play controller dot enviro speed multiplier is equal to result multi. Okay. So I made a bunch of mistakes then, so let's try and explain this again. So we're setting our result multi equal back to 1 each time we run this method, so that we're calculating from this base point always of this is equal to the base multi. So the result multi is, if it's a speed boost, is multiplied by the pad multiplier, and then if it's not a speed boost, we're going to divide it by the pad multiplier, and then what we're going to do is we're going to set the player's speed to that. So let's go through these calculations so they make sense. Let's say the base is 1 here. So this is 1 equals 1. Well, it doesn't matter what this equals. It's going to set this to 1. This equals 1. And then we're going to go, this is now instead equal to 1 times 2, because that's what we've set our speed multi. You could set this to whatever, but it's 1 times 2, so this equals 2. And then we're setting our environmental speed multi then to equal to 2. Or if, in this case, where it's going to equal, well, it's 1 divided by 2, so it's going to equal a half. So we're going to set our speed multi on our player controller equal to a half. So let's go back over to our player controller. So now on our player controller in this calculation, let's say this, let's do this in comments over the top. So this is always 5 because that's what we've set it to. So, and then let's just, so this is 1 minus 1 for this side of here. Well, then we're also going to add to it whatever this is. So by default it's 1, meaning all of this equals 1. But let's say we've multiplied this by 2. So we've got it on a speed pad, so that's going to equal 2. So this whole equation is going to equal 2. So instead we have 2 times 5. So our move speed will now be 10. But if, say, it was the other way around and this was 0.5, then this would equal 0.5 as well, and we will be setting our move speed equal to 2.5. So it's a bit of maths in there, but we get to where we want, and we can very easily edit each of these numbers now, so that if anything we want to change speeds with, we can come in and edit these. Let's go back to the speed pad and put some functionality in for when to activate it, and then we'll be all done. Alright, so we're not going to use a collision on this. A collision would obviously work, but we're actually going to use a trigger enter instead. So we're going to go on trigger and I clicked the wrong one. Alright, on trigger enter. We're going to then put our brackets back because we're just deleting them left and right today. Okay, and we're going to go if other. Actually, let's do what we've been doing on the other ones and call this col, because I like to call it col. If col dot, I sometimes don't like, oh, I see why it's unhappy, typoed again. Col dot compared tag is player, because that's what the player's tag is. We're missing a bracket here, second bracket. Then we're going to go if active pads contains this. So we're checking if it doesn't contain this. Active pads.add this. We're going to set player on pad equal to true. and then we're going to update player speed. Okay, let's neaten all this up. I feel like something's not right with my brackets, but other than that, no, it's just unaligned. Okay, so when the player is enters the trigger zone, we're going to add the pad to our list of active pads, and then we're going to set that the player is on the pad to true, and we're going to call update speed. We're going to run through this, and then this active pad list will have the at least one pad in it because we've added that pad to it, and it will perform this calculation. Okay, and now let's do the same for on trigger exit for removing them. So we go on trigger exit, and then the code is exactly the same almost. So let's just copy and paste it to make our life easy. Let's remove this null check. Let's change this back to col. And then instead of adding this, we want to remove this. We want to set this to false. And then we want to update our player's speed. Okay. So this is a bit of a weird code because you have to handle a multiple weird interactions where the player is kind of moving between two speeds pads. We want to keep providing that speed constantly. We also want to be calculating the speed and it resulting back to not stacking on top of itself. So if you're not careful with how you calculate it, when you go in the first speed pad, your speed will be doubled. And then you go on to the second speed pad and it'll double it again. And then you go on to the third speed pad and you'll double that again. So suddenly you're going 8 times speed and you're off the map, gone through the wall. Because if you move things too fast, Unity's physics just doesn't work properly. So we're instead saying we will calculate this if it's on the list. And then we're looping through the list and making the calculation. But if it's not, then we're not doing the calculation. So we're literally just setting this to 1. So if there's no speed pads in the list, we're going to skip this because we're only doing this for each speed pad in the active pads list. And if there's none, well, we skip this for each. But if there is, we're going to calculate resultant multi is equal to this. But say there's 2 pads, well, it's still going to equal the same amount because we're using the same, we're not multiplying this again. But as the player leaves the first, so as the player is in the edge of the 2 pads, he's going to leave the first pad, but he's still going to be in the second pad. So this will continue to calculate his speed. So that will handle that transition to be a constant pace. And then when the player is no longer in any pads, as we'd said, it will calculate none of this. So we'll just be setting this to 1, basically. This is just a complicated way of writing set it to 1. Okay, so all we're doing is when the player is entering a pad, we're saying the player is on this pad, add it to the list, and when the player is off that pad, we're saying the player is not on this pad and remove it from the list. Don't. So why do we have player on pad? Oh, okay. I see. So the reason why we have this player on pad variable, which doesn't get used for anything else, is for if it's a toggle and it toggles while the player's still on the pad, it's going to update the player's speed and recalculate the fact that it's on a slow pad. The only thing that's kind of weird that will happen is if you're on the edge of a slow and a speed pad, it's just going to pick whichever one is calculated last. It's going to be applied to the player. I wouldn't be able to say for sure which one would get calculated last. I'm guessing it would be the one that you're less in. I guess it would be the one that you last entered would probably be calculated last. So if you're sort of standing on the edge of two, it's going to sort of pick one of the two things. It won't really function greatly, but that's a bit of a weird use case where you're on one side speed and one side slow. Let's set this up. Let's get it actually functioning because that was just a lot of me yapping. Okay. All right. Let's go one of these, this second color changing floor, and let's duplicate it. No, let's not duplicate it. Let's just grab it. Let's remove is toggle, and then let's make some new colors. All right, let's actually move it a bit closer to the player. Let's actually use, oh, Jesus, move, disappeared. All right, let's use the same colors because it's just easy to remember then. We don't need to change the colors for everything again. So this is a color changing floor, and we're going to make it changing speed floor. And then let's add an empty to it. Then on the empty, we're going to add a box collider. Move it up a little bit. I'm going to set this to is trigger this box collider. And let's move the whole floor into the actual ground a little bit. And then on this, we're going to add the speed pad. This is a bit where we need to set these to work. Let's go speed multi of 2 is speed boost as the starting, and then we've got a free second duration. So let's set the duration to free. Alright, so we should see that as it's green, it'll be a speed boost, and when it's red, it'll be a slow. So let's see if that's working. It should also put this in by itself. So, yep. So see it toggled. Alright, now let's test what happens when the player goes and jumps on it. Oh, it makes us go faster and then slow. See, we're very slow and then we're fast. So everything's working as we intended. Now you should be able to set up a whole row of these if we did do the code correctly. Let's set up a whole row. They should work in so that the player can transition from one to the other perfectly fine. Slow and fast. And fast. So as you can see, the player's speed stays consistent as he moves between the two panels, and then as soon as it changes to its other state, it's instantly changing his speed. So everything is working as intended. Well, this is probably a bit of a long one again, but I hope you guys enjoyed, and I didn't confuse you too much because I don't know if I explained a few things the best on this, but hopefully you understand how it all works, and I'll see you in the next video. See you in the next video.